Please welcome Kyle Samani, Managing Partner at Multicoin Capital, and Tarek Mansour, Co-founder and CEO at Kalshi.
Alrighty, good morning everyone. Sorry for the slight change in schedule, a few logistical things, but we have Tarek here from Kalshi. Kalshi is, I think, as you all probably seen in the media, one of the craziest companies of the year. It's been a wild story, so Tarek, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, we'll kick things off very simple. Can you share a little bit more about your background, and then how did you meet Luana, your co-founder?
So actually posted about this recently. I was born in Bakersfield, California. A lot of people didn't know I was American. But then moved when I was very young to Lebanon. That's where I grew up. I would say the sort of most dominant feature was I was really, really into math. I was basically, math was a very big part of my identity. And I kind of like was really obsessed in sort of like how far I could take my abilities there. And I did a bunch of the Olympiads, and like I got into like a bunch of the competitive stuff. And from a very early age, like it was like, okay, where do I go? Where are these kind of like math nerds going? And it was MIT, so I made it a goal to get there. And very early at MIT, I got pretty enamored with financial markets. It was just sort of like, it was like so rich, and like all the smartest people were going there, and there's just like so much complexity and so much to unravel and unpack. And so went to work at Goldman. So there's like two parallel tracks before maybe I talk about the founder story, Luana was also kind of similar background, but she grew up in Brazil, and she was a ballerina, and she was kind of famous freshman year at MIT because she was this ballerina that like pivoted her career and showed up to MIT all of a sudden. And so I had to meet her, and we basically became friends, did a lot of work together in finance, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the founding story. It took us a few years to basically come up with the idea before we started.
All right, that kind of leads to the next question, which was like, what was your light bulb moment that led you to realize the world needs prediction markets?
Yeah, I didn't even, at the time, I didn't even think of it as like a prediction market concept. It was a lot, so it was Goldman. So the first time I really encountered this, I was an intern at Goldman in 2016 in the summer, and it was really striking the extent to which the demand that we're receiving. So I was in this desk, equity derivatives desk, was centered around events. It was really, and there were like two main events that summer. It was like, will Brexit happen or not, and will Trump win the election? And the thing that really marked me was the Trump trade that we sold, and we sold that in bulk. Like we sold that to everybody that was walking through our doors.
Sorry, what was the Trump trade?
Yeah, so I'm about to say it. So the Trump trade was essentially an effective short on the S&P around election week. So we used to call it counter spread, and you can add like a bunch of more complexity around the options and swaps. But the Trump trade was essentially you're short the S&P on the week of the election. So the S&P is going to go down after the day of the election. A lot of these people were right about their prediction. Trump did actually win, but they lost money. So that's the first time I was like, well, we can definitely do a better product there. Like there's at least, we should probably figure out a way for people to make money when they're right. So people were pissed after that trade. And then the other thing I realized is like, well, Goldman had made a lot of money out of that. We sold it, and we were taking like these crazy like premiums on top, and so this was sort of the thing that I started thinking about and getting obsessed with, which is, and we discussed this last time. You have a financial market to price companies. You have one to price currencies. You have financial markets to price these kind of physical or tangible things. What if we built one to price simple questions about the future? And that we got really excited about that because the TAM would potentially be much larger than the TAM of the current financial markets, even the stock market, because a market on politics or economics or weather or culture could basically relate to anyone. Like now you start talking about every single person being a participant in this market. And then the second thing it felt like a very useful thing to build, because if you do believe in free markets, if you believe that markets work, what you really believe is that they're effective price discovery mechanisms. And in this case, it would be an effective probability or prediction discovery mechanism. It would figure out what the truth is on whether something is going to happen or not. And if we get a little bit smart about the future, it's a very valuable thing to build. We can make better decisions, allocate resources better, manage risks better. And so we're like, we got to do this. But it was illegal when we first started, as you know.
So next kind of logical question is, Kalshi's legal strategy has been predicated on a pretty interesting insight that you all figured out. Can you walk us through the process of how you came to understand kind of the core legal strategy and theory of Kalshi?
I think when we first came up against this, so we realized this is not allowed in the US. And
when was this? What year?
So we started the company in basically end of 2018, early 2019. And we kind of started digging in and realized, okay, like this is just not allowed. There's been a bunch of trials before, and there have been trials of prediction markets. I think the most effective one was a company called InTrade, which had this really amazing story. The founder, this guy John Delaney, actually had a lot of the similar insights in sort of the 90s. And there's segments about him on CNBC talking about like the election forecast and all of that. But the company was shut down in 2012 by regulators. And the interesting thing about this is 2 weeks later he died climbing Mount Everest, and there was like a whole controversy whether he like naturally died Mount Everest or he just like went there to kill himself. But the history of these markets generally was sort of fraught with regulatory issues. And at the beginning of the company, we're like, okay, we're going to define a principle, and that principle is regulatory first. We're going to do everything 100% clean. And if this is the universe of financial markets today, we're not going to go around it, we're going to expand it. We're going to figure out how to move it beyond its current boundaries and then operate within that. And there were two reasons for that. I think in financial services and healthcare, regulation is very important. Like when things go bad in those two industries, they tend to go bad in pretty vicious ways. It's not like some taxi driver that got pissed. It's like you have a $10 billion hole that we have to figure out how to plug now, right? And so we didn't feel like we could get to the mainstream scale that we wanted without proper regulation. And then the second thing is, I think it was a bit more philosophical. Like we were just more excited about building, the next generation Robinhood or Coinbase, rather than some sort of offshore betting site. And so we spent 4 years essentially with one singular goal: let's regulate this thing. And so we didn't launch a product for 4 years. And that was a very difficult period. A mix of regulatory strategy, hustling, doing legal analysis for basically 12, 14 hours a day, nothing else, all the way up until we cracked that wall and basically first legalized prediction markets. Because again, the law itself, the regulators did not allow it, but the law itself actually had room for these markets. And the law basically at a very high level, it says like, as long as there's some utility to a market, it is a financial market and it's not gambling. And for us, it was always like, it is the notion that trading on Brexit has no utility was a little crazy, right? Like the idea that Brexit doesn't impact people economically, first and foremost, or an election doesn't impact people economically, first and foremost, was crazy, right? And so we kind of kept powering through until we got legalized. But then the big sort of, I would say, like fork in the road was the government blocked the election market. That was the one that they would just not let
2020
through.
or 24 or two?
So 2020, no, we're not. 2020, we're still in the kind of figuring out how to kind of get launched. But then we started fighting about the election market really 2021 to 2022. They blocked it. Then
for midterms.
Yes, exactly. So we're trying to get it through by the midterms, and then they sort of did this pocket veto thing where they delayed it all the way past the midterms. So we lost that. And then there was a very brutal period because we've been like already spending a few years on this, then let us do the election, which is critical, and then we lost a bunch of the team. People kind of lost confidence in the whole thing, and people were like, well, you should pivot or do something else. But we're pretty stubborn, so we're going to try again. So we try again in 2022 to 2023 so that we get it for 2024. It's a little bit like, losing the World Cup and then we like go back to training the next day so that you can win the next one, which is in 4 years. So it was pretty brutal. But sometimes this is what it takes. But 2023, we got rejected again. And this was really the point where everybody was like, we got to we got to do something else, pivot to AI or something, and but like Luana, my co-founder, was extremely stubborn. She's like, what we're gonna do now is sue the federal government, and we're like, to be clear, we're like a 20 people, we're a company of 20 people, and still a small startup, doesn't have product market fit, still figuring out what we need to do. And I remember we went to the board, and Alfred from Sequoia is on the board, and he looked at us. He's like, "Look, I mean, the pattern, like if you want my advice, is like a company of your size suing its own regulator, like you will die. This is how this thing goes. But a lot of times with these kind of marketplace consumer companies, there's usually like this weird, unusual anti-pattern that happens that actually makes a company. And maybe this is yours. I just cannot tell you in my sane conscience to sue the government. So I'll do whatever you want, and so we sued the government. And actually, in some ways, all the bad things happen after that. When you sue your own regulator, you experience this sort of very slow kind of like death by 1,000 paper cuts. It's like they bleed you from everywhere. And I think if I had lost that lawsuit, the company would have probably died. But we won, and it was the same insight. It was essentially election markets. Yes, some people speculate on this market, but being able to know who's going to win an election or any of these other questions is extremely critical. It's very important. And the courts basically rule in our favor. And I think after that, the company went pretty vertical.
I think you sued the CFTC twice, no?
No, once.
Oh,
well, there was like the appeal, and
Okay.
I threatened to sue a few times, but regulators tend to break the law more often than people think, and I think they have to.
Crypto knows.
Crypto knows, yeah. They have to be held accountable. Like the law is the law, right? Like it's not just for the industry; it's also for regulators, and that's important.
And can you help people here understand? You said like there's the Commodities and Exchange Act, this kind of thing, and then what's like how is Kalshi legal if the CFTC was saying it's illegal?
Well, they were kind of blocking the market, which they have the power to do. They can just not allow us to list the market. The SEC and CFTC have broad authority. They can say this is okay, this is not okay. And they were saying this is not okay. But at the end of the day, the regulators have an act. They have a statute, a piece of legislation that they are operating within. And, I read the statute, and I'm like...
This is the CEA, right?
The CEA, the Commodities Exchange Act. So the CEA, the Commodities Exchange Act is CFTC, and the Securities Exchange Act is Securities, the SEC.
This is 1936, passed.
Yeah, and it's a kind of a few iterations, and there's a long history for it. I mean, read the early innings of that. So there was a Supreme Court decision in 1905 that was about legalizing grain futures, commodity futures, and it was so similar to what's happening today, which is this gambling or is this a financial instrument? And then the SCOTUS made a very similar decision to what we got last year, which was yes, some people are speculating, but like some people are hedging or using the prices to figure out how much inventory they should build up. And so this is a financial instrument. And so the Commodities Exchange Act, you'd read it and you're like, this seems to be pretty legal. And so, we made them basically uphold the law. That's it.
All right, so now where is Kalshi at today in terms of revenue, number of employees, major partners? I know you have Robinhood's announced, but like just give us kind of a quick lay of the land.
Yeah, so we've grown a lot. I think we're still figuring this out. I think we are, top 3 fastest growing companies in the US this year. I think Anthropic is number 1, we might be number 2. So just some sense of scale. So we're doing 1.5 billion of volume a week now. We are pretty mainstream. So we have millions of customers. The business is interesting because we have a Kalshi.com, a direct-to-consumer business, but also a brokered business, which is actually the traditional go-to-market for exchanges. So when you want to buy an option on a stock or on S&P, you don't go to CBOE or CME, you go to Schwab or Robinhood. And so that's been a key part of our strategy for a while. And we've launched Robinhood Webull. There was a leak yesterday you might have seen about our crypto exchange friend. But we are essentially going to be launching most, if not all, the kind of large retail brokerages on Kalshi over the next 18 to 24 months. And the way to really visualize this is I think we really now live in a world where like there's stocks, there's options, there's crypto, and then there's prediction markets. And prediction markets are becoming a very, very dominant category when it comes to retail trading. yeah, I think that's pretty much it, actually.
Okay. Tarek can't say it, but if you scroll through Twitter yesterday, you might see that the folks at Coinbase may or may not be integrating Kalshi. It's all over Twitter. Cool. One of the most exciting opportunities for prediction markets is to reshape the nature of the media itself, especially around financial and sports media. Can you talk about how you think the media landscape is going to evolve over the next few years as prediction markets become part of it?
Yeah, I think there is kind of there's a stock market, and then there's like, these financial analysts or financial reporters that like analyze the stock market, right? And you see this a lot on CNBC, for example, and like Jim Cramer is talking about which stock is going up or down, and they're really kind of analysts or reporters on this on stocks. My mental model has kind of evolved to be like, the analogy for prediction markets is like, well, reporters are basically reporting on what's happening in the world, and prediction markets are like kind of the stock market for what's happening in the world. So now, in some ways, all reporters will become financial reporters. And now they have a tool, they have a stock or a ticker or a market that they can basically drive from and talk about. And there's a number now to all these things that they're talking about. Will TikTok get banned? Well, there's a number. Will Trump increase or decrease tariffs? There's a probability number that you can talk about. What's going to happen with the Epstein files? There's a number, right? And so everything that's covered in the news will have a prediction market associated to it. And I think there's going to be this amazing synergy between reporting and prediction markets, where reporting makes prediction markets pricing and forecast better, and prediction markets become this invaluable, I would say, critical tool for reporters to use in their reporting, because it's just more truthful and more accurate. And we're seeing that. So you should expect, Kalshi, we're going to be announcing a number of really large-scale media deals over the next few months with really kind of pretty amazing news networks. But then you can take it further. Like, you could take that even a step further, which is, what if all the news networks operate functionally a bit like Robinhood operates on Kalshi today, or some of these other brokers, which is, today the news, the primary mechanism to monetize news is ads. There's a word where, you read a Wall Street Journal article, or you're on CNBC and you're watching a segment, and then you can trade directly within those mediums. Like, will the Fed raise rates or not? Will TikTok get banned or not? And you can basically buy yes, no right there while engaging with the content. And that's a much more accretive way to monetize your audience than ads. Ads, it's a bit like an oil economy. You build up the eyeballs and you spend them on ads. And people hate ads, obviously. But prediction markets actually increase your engagement. They don't decrease it. And I think over the next few years, this is going to be, like, prediction markets is going to be very much embedded in the way that we ingest and the way that we think about the news.
All right, next up we've got, when are we going to have prediction markets for beating earnings or for stock prices?
This may be a you question, actually. You're helping me with that.
we already have how many iPhones will Apple ship next quarter. We already have that, but we don't have will Apple beat earnings. So the interesting thing about these markets is they sit in this sort of like, and so for the audience, there's been a historical, in financial services, the sort of, World Cup of financial services, the sort of fight between the CFTC and SEC that's been going on for decades, which is like, what is the jurisdiction of either of these two agencies? It seems like this is the first time in a while, maybe in history, that there's this sort of really, like, there's this kind of real desire to kind of create more synergies between the two agencies. And when it comes to earnings, and when it comes to, even stocks and where stocks are going to go, this sits right in this kind of middle area between this. Is this a CFC product, a commodity, or is it security? And where does it fit between the two? I think we're going to figure this out in the next few months. We're very close. So we've been working with the two agencies, but we're going to have the first set of regulated earnings products, I think, in the next few months. Yeah, and for some context, Mike Selig, who I believe got appointed by the Senate yesterday, or he's in confirmation now, he's now going to be the new chair of CFTC, is from SEC. So there's been like this hope that these two agencies are actually going to come work together in a more productive way. All right, next up we've got is one of the common criticisms of Kalshi is that you don't own enough direct customers, but instead rely too much on partners like Robinhood. How do you respond to these critics?
People always criticize something that's working, financials look pretty nice right now. So I don't know. Maybe that's the best response. I mean, look, a few things. I think the broker strategy has always been part of our strategy. That's the way to really kind of brute force liquidity and really accelerate the adoption of these markets, because, whether it's Robinhood or Schwab or Fidelity or these, they own, you aggregate those three alone, and you're talking about like hundreds of millions of people that have funded accounts that are sitting in these brokerages. Like, and it took decades to build that, right? It's not something that a company could do in a year or two. And the brokered model has been the historical model for exchanges, right? Like, CBOE and CME are mostly intermediated. Their volumes are actually, for CBOE, it's actually all via brokers. And that's the model. Like, the exchange is the thing that focuses on the liquidity, the product, the asset. It's more focused on one thing, whereas the broker is a bit like the supermarket. It's like you go and you buy all your financial products there, which are stocks, your 401k, and prediction markets or other things. And it works. It's actually very, very orthogonal and very synergistic. It is not as large of a percentage as people think of our flow. Actually, our direct-to-consumer product is the one that's growing the fastest and has become quite massive in the last few months. But the most important thing here is, are these businesses competitive or are they accretive to each other? And they're actually very accretive, because brokers bring flow and liquidity that make our direct product better. So you have more liquidity and you can trade in more markets. And our direct product enables us to have extremely high product velocity and market development velocity. So we can put things to market really fast when we have our own direct consumer app, which, we figure out what's working here, and then we take the things that work and put it on brokers. And so there's a really neat flywheel there. And what we see with brokers, a lot of the way that they make decisions, they kind of see what's working on Kalshi, and then they list it on their brokerage. So no, we're very, very bullish on this strategy, and it's clearly working.
All right, next up is, look, you've obviously been going head-to-head with Polymarket for a little while. How do you think about the rest of the startups and kind of the landscape and prediction markets beyond just kind of the direct competition with Poly?
I don't know if we're going as head-to-head with Poly as people think. And I think maybe this will become more clear in the next year or two. Look, the ones I think a lot about these days are, I'm thinking a lot more about CME. They're entering prediction markets in December, which I'm very excited about. I think this is going to legitimize the space this is going to be another step function in legitimizing the space. I mean, they are the 800-pound gorilla. And I think there's going to be meaningful competition. I mean, Terry is incredible, and obviously it's CME. They have all the distribution in the world. And then, FanDuel, DraftKings are coming in as well, and they are also very worthy adversaries, and we're also very excited about having them in the space. I think what we have is, I think we have the highest product velocity in this space, and by quite a margin. I think we're the best at product, and we're the best at shipping new products. But those two have incredible ability to acquire customers. They have incredibly well-oiled marketing flywheels. And so it'll be very interesting to see how the next few years pan out. But overall, I think we just see the space evolving. And in terms of startups, I think that's kind of, at least, maybe talking my book. I think it's going to be very hard for companies to kind of tackle any of us head on at this point for new up and comer. I mean, you have a regulatory mode, you have a liquidity and marketplace mode, and usually marketplaces, when they get into the virtual cycle, it's very hard to come and take market share from them. It's very kind of similar to kind of an Airbnb in terms of dynamic. So what I see a lot of the interesting, and I think you guys are seeing this, is people plugging into the ecosystem. It's people building on top of the ecosystem that we have, which is like, maybe a vertical app that are specialized in one form, one category of prediction markets that's powered by, Kalshi, or like market makers and like, interesting new ways to provide liquidity to these markets. And so that's, I think, where we're most excited on. And we as a company, as Kalshi, have started making small investments. Some of these companies are building on top of the ecosystem when we see that they have promise. But I expect that to become a whole thing, a bit like how Solana evolved over time.
All right. Next up, how do you think about the opportunity for Kalshi in crypto?
We get asked this question a lot. The way we really sort of introduce it into the org is we think about crypto very much like we think about AI. It's interesting. People ask me like, okay, are you going to be a crypto company or not crypto company? And I always think it's like, well, are you asking all the companies that are using AI are going to be an AI company or not an AI company? In some ways, like in 5 years, all companies are going to be AI companies, because if they're not, they're probably going to die. And I think that's also true for crypto. Like, if you're not, and there's like obviously a bunch of applications and so on, but like if you're not embracing this technology that does actually work better for many, many different use cases, you're probably going to be left behind. And so for us specifically, I think one, is basically access to liquidity that sits on chain, and I think there's a lot of it. Two, I think enhanced transparency. So if you can do things on chain, people can just see more of what's happening, and people love that, because then they can build dashboards, they can basically build stats, they can drive information that we may not even be able to drive or see. And then the last one is this idea of enabling builders to build on top. This kind of idea of an open source ecosystem where people can just build what they want, how they want, without permission. And so that's the mental model we have. And I think whenever something fits into these three buckets, we're going to go after it pretty aggressively. But the last thing I would say maybe is we're also going to just be doing more crypto markets. We have a few announcements coming in the next few months as well. It's going to be pretty exciting.
Speaking about AI, when do prediction markets shape AI responses? And like when you get and like if you talk to Grok or whatever, ChatGPT, when do we have Kalshi markets impacting their response?
It's starting to happen, especially when you're asking questions about the future. I always think about the news and X as sort of like, or especially X as a crowdsourced answer to what's happening what's happened in the past and what's happening in the present. And prediction markets are the same thing, but for what's happening in the future or what might happen in the future. And so it's already happening. Right now we're seeing, a lot of how the sort of the models are learning. They're often sort of learning from X, Reddit, and then just news articles. And so it's a bit indirect still. So like when people are talking about the prediction markets on X, or they're talking about them on the news, like the Grok and ChatGPT pulls it and then use it. But we're starting to progressively see these bots just taking it directly from first-party side, like going to Kalshi and then actually taking the answer. And I think there's some work to be done. I think we may do some technical integration there with some of these companies.
All right, Kalshi means everything in Arabic. Can you expand on what do you think the 5-year vision is for Kalshi?
We're financialize everything. And I think everything can be a tradable asset. I just think the universe of what is tradable is today versus what it can be is just so small. We're still in very, very, very early innings. But when you talk about economic indicators, weather and climate, and where climate is going, when you talk about COVID, healthcare numbers, what Taylor Swift is going to do or not do, and how our albums are going to perform. Recently, I think a day ago, we just launched a partnership with StockX, which was, there's all these memes about Labubu futures being launched, but this is a big economy. People are like trading these, there's like an underlying market for buying and selling Pokemon cards and sneakers. Why not build a derivative market on top and have people be able to take a directional view on these things without owning the asset? And so that can be applied to really anything. Anything that has a difference in opinion can be traded one day. So I think we're going to have a very exciting few years.
All right, and then the last question is, what are some markets that you think are going to be very big in 1 to 2 years that either don't exist today or are very small?
I think everything around culture and entertainment. The early signs are pretty amazing, and I think that
Can you give us an example of one market that
I think who's gonna attend Taylor Swift's wedding, for example. I think that thing over time could rival the Super Bowl. I'm not even kidding. I think the early signals. It's just that the habit is not built yet. I think people are used to, okay, Super Bowl, you can take a position on the Super Bowl, but people don't even know, they're not educated that you can do this. But the early signs, in quantitative and qualitative, the retention is very high in these markets. We're seeing a lot of women adopt these markets in ways that haven't before. Yesterday, one of my good friends texted me, and I can maybe read the text, but the text was basically something like, like I hate gambling more than anyone on this planet. Like gambling is one of those things that it's kind of actual.
Yeah, like poker, blackjack.
She was talking about this kind of general notion of gambling. She like had a very strong, kind of disdain to gambling. But she's like, but man, like Kalshi is just like, all these culture markets. I'm like making money out of all these morons that are wrong about all these different things. I'm doing this analysis and like figuring out how many, who is this director for this movie, and so I'm predicting what the success of that movie is going to be, and like it's like thrilling, and like I'm like, I think that could be anyone. Like everyone is an expert on something, and they feel very strongly about something, and I think Kalshi could be a home for that person. So I think culture is a place where I think it's very underserved today. Yeah,
cool.
We have work to do.
All right, well, Tarek, thanks so much for swinging by. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for letting us invest.
Yeah.